bizarre claim that because some people might react unpleasantly or potentially violently to us who have spoken so far, well, maybe not all of us, agree is an anti-Semitic campaign, that because we're going to take action to target this anti-Semitic campaign, that might inflame community tension. So what we're saying effectively is that the elected House of Commons of the United Kingdom shouldn't act because some people might not like it and they might get violent.
I'm on the computer now.
Follows that line of argument is, I'm afraid, a country that is...
it's not a very good one, so you'll have to tell me in the comments how good or it is.
We've all seen the marches. They've been reacting fairly unpleasantly already.
Brig and Gould. We haven't had any marches, not in this area anyway.
I'll give way very quickly, man. Very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. I've got a huge amount of affection and understanding of what it is that he is saying. Could he just give me his view on this point, which is my concern? I take everything that he's saying, but at a time when our country can play a pivotal role in trying to de-escalate and find a peaceful solution to this horror that is unraveling in the Middle East, what assessment has he made of the damage of partiality that could be levelled against the government by bringing this bill forward at this time? He said he had affection for me. Not many people say that, so I welcome that, and I'll be framing that part of Hansard. But I would just push back to him on that though. How is impartiality impacted by outlawing something all of us agree is anti-Semitic? That, the BDS Palestinian National Committee, who sits on that? Hamas and Islamic Jihad. So we shouldn't ban this anti-Semitic campaign because some people might not like it. So I think you can push that argument very quickly back in the other direction. I went over last time, so I'm going to stay absolutely within time, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'll just end with a quote which I think is very powerful from the Jewish Chronicle today from Stephen Pollard, who's a former editor. He said, you might think that now at all times, when the world has witnessed the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, there would be a clamour, a rush, even a demand for the BDS bill to be passed. Now of all times, surely, is the time to stand up and say, we see where Jew hate leads. And I think that is the best argument for this legislation, and why now, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for being within time. I am going to put the limit on, though, of 8 minutes, just to ensure that everybody does get the chance to speak. Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think the speech that we've just listened to from Member for Brig and Gould shows exactly why this isn't the right time for this bill and this debate. The speech that he criticised from the Right Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington was a perfectly reasonable speech, making the case for the tools of boycott, sanctions and divestment. And to suggest that those tools are intrinsically Semitic, I think it is just quite clearly and evidentially wrong. The vast generalisation
because they won't help me.
I think again shows why this bill is deeply unhelpful and the timing downright dangerous. The brutal attacks on Israeli civilians by Hamas on October the 7th have filled every right-thinking person with horror and underscored the urgency of standing against violence. And we do this, I believe, in part by defending and advocating human rights. These principles need to guide our response to the collective punishment of the civilian population of Gaza too, and to any other unlawful action being perpetrated by the Israeli or the Palestinian authorities or by Hamas. So I'm struggling to understand why, as one of the leading global champions of human rights, the UK would want to send a signal that it thinks human rights only matter selectively, because that would be the impact of the current wording of this bill passes. It would say to the world, some people's rights matter less than other people's. Frankly, the timing seems designed to make political capital from a horrendous situation. The government should be ashamed. I think this is a new low. It is reckless, it is provocative, and it is deeply damaging. The government risks igniting the situation further by bringing back this bill with the clause singling out Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. This legislation effectively applies restrictions
What exactly?
Expression and debate, and it does so in a way that risks polarizing views even further. And at any time, let alone in this most sensitive of contexts, enshrining in law such partiality towards the conflict, I think is beyond irresponsible. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've tabled 3 amendments to this bill, 2 on the ability of public bodies to make decisions about their activities on the environmental grounds, 1 to exclude fossil fuels from the provisions of this bill. Looking first specifically at fossil fuels, there is a worrying lack of clarity from the government about what may or may not be permissible for public bodies to do should this bill be enacted. My amendment number 15 is therefore intended to clear that up and to protect the rights of public authorities to divest from fossil fuels. Earlier this week, Raymond Duggan published evidence that at least £12.2 billion worth of local government pension funds are invested in fossil fuels. The clarity my amendment is seeking to provide is needed because fossil fuels are obviously not covered by the environmental misconduct exemption on illegal activities, because extraction actively currently happens, obviously legally. And it's needed because decisions to divest could easily be brought into scope of Clause 1 because a fossil fuel company, especially in the case of state oil and gas firms, could easily meet the threshold for association with a foreign government. Majority state-owned or controlled oil or gas firms like Saudi Aramco, Equinor, Petrobras, Gazprom, or other companies that are highly associated with a foreign government would obviously be considered affiliated with certain countries, and that would impact on decisions made about things like pension funds. The ability of pension schemes in particular to divest from fossil fuels under current legislation and guidance is well established and compatible with fiduciary duty. So consideration of whether to divest often includes discussion or consideration of individual states as examples of why divestment is desirable. And campaigners will often publicly cite examples of states where fossil fuel extraction is taking place as a reason to divest from fossil fuel assets, even if the divestment being sought is much broader. This is reasonable, it is entirely responsible, given the financial risks associated with things like carbon bubbles and stranded assets, let alone the climate crisis more broadly, and it is currently lawful. But if this legislation passes, such consideration could run the risk of being judged to have been influenced by political or moral disapproval of foreign state conduct, and could thus bring divestment decisions within the scope of the bill. If the Minister does not intend fossil fuel divestment to be covered, it must be explicitly excluded, not left to run the kinds of risks I've outlawed. Turning to environmental misconduct, again, I think some sorely lacking clarity needs to be injected into the bill, hence my 2 amendments. The bill has an exemption that is limited to environmentally harmful behaviour that, and I quote, amounts to an offence whether under the law of a part of the United Kingdom or any other country or territory. Now, much environmentally destructive activity takes place entirely legally, and indeed this could even be the rationale for a boycott or a divestment campaign. During the passage of the Environment Act 21, the limitations of due diligence measures that only targeted illegal deforestation were made clear. And that was because, for example, a significant proportion of deforestation due to soy or palm oil in Brazil and Indonesia respectively could take place either legally or, frankly, it would be incredibly difficult to distinguish between legal and illegal deforestation. So my Amendment 8 would expand the environmental grounds on which a public body is allowed to make certain economic activities and decisions beyond activities that are currently simply an offence. And without it, frankly, this exemption is unworkable at worst and will undermine good practice at best. Let me explain. A number of pension experts, giving evidence at committee stage, warn that the bill will impact on environmental, social and governance investment decisions and cuts across the fiduciary duty. These include the Northern Ireland Local Government Officer Superannuation Committee and the Local Government Association. ESG factors are now standard practice to consider when looking at investments, and there is widespread concern that the environmental misconduct exemption is so weak that it doesn't provide the exemptions that ministers claim that it does. This is a threat to adherence with things like the United Nations principles of responsible investment or indeed the Sustainable Development Goals. It fails to recognise that investors often consider divergence from best practice and not simply breaches of law. And it fails to reflect that in countries with opaque legal systems, for example, establishing that an offence has occurred may not be straightforward. And there's also a risk that a campaign directed at persuading public bodies to boycott or divest on environmental grounds could end up coming within the scope of the legislation. And that could happen, for example, if case studies are judged to constitute criticism or disapproval of a foreign state, or if they identify where an environmentally harmful activity is taking place, for example, logging in the Amazon. Now, the government is fond of claiming that it has the very best environmental credentials, so why would it want to scupper the potential of public bodies to demand higher environmental standards in, for example, their supply chains or from their pet fund managers with a poorly worded reference to environmental misconduct. My Amendment 8 would tackle that and provide for a proper exemption, and my Amendment 9 extends the definition of environmental misconduct to include damage regardless of whether it is legal or illegal, and to include species, habitats, and the natural world. It replicates word for word the definition of natural environment in the government's 2021 Environment Act, and as such, I hope that it provides the consistency and clarity that is not currently afforded by the current wording. I'd be especially interested to know why ministers didn't use the wording in the first place, given that it's already in that Environment Act, and why they're not aiming for a consistent definition of the natural environment across different legislation. To conclude, these amendments are designed to properly protect the exemptions that ministers claim are in the bill, and to do so in line with definitions in other legislation.
Nicola Richards.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak in favour of the motion and support the bill. The events of the 7th of October mean we're debating this bill in a different context. We're doing so against the backdrop of the murder of at least 1,400 Jewish people and the kidnapping of hoodlums in Israel, as well as
the events on the 8th of October. Sorry, dear, it was the 7th.
This is not a solution on its own to anti-Semitism. It's not on its own the key to solving every problem in the Middle East. But I want to explain what will provide much needed reassurance to the Jewish community here, but also benefit both Israelis and Palestinians. I'll set out why the BDS movement is harmful internationally, as well as being discriminatory towards Jewish communities here in the UK, and why it's vital that Israel is on the name of on the face of this bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not Jewish. I grew up in Dudley. We do not have a Jewish community there. I grew up hungry to know more about history and politics, but I knew that when I was young, my father worked for an Israeli company. He moved around jobs as a salesman, so I remembered his work, by which country the company originated from. For me, Israel was just another one of those places he'd travelled to work, and when he worked for the Israeli company, Iskar. Iskar was set up by Steph Wertheimer, a German Jew who fled the Nazis in 1937. He started a small metal shop and tool-making company called Iskar in 1942.
Right, another clause. Why did he flee the Nazis in 1937 when the war didn't start till 1939? So she just said the 8th of October.
This nationalisation is problematic and should be boycotted. Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend, the member for Northampton North, has already mentioned SodaStream, a successful Israeli company which exports its products across the world.
I don't know who these guys are sitting on the sidelines.
As well as once employing around 900 Palestinians who relied on the company for their livelihood. However, in 2015, they were forced out of the West Bank due to the BDS movement, leading these Palestinians to losing their jobs. This harms the very people the BDS movement claims to be supporting. Ali Jaffer, a shift manager from the West Bank village who worked for SodaStream for 2 years, summed this up when he said, quote, "All the people who wanted to close the factory are mistaken. They didn't take into consideration the families. And it's these families that we need to be thinking about today when we vote on this bill." When SodaStream closed its factory in the West Bank, it moved to the Negev Desert, where it once organised the largest iftar celebration on the final day of Ramadan in Israel. Almost 3,000 Israelis and Palestinians came together to break bread at their factory in Rabat. The BDS movement remained against SodaStream's factory in the Negev Desert because they found new reasons for doing so. They said SodaStream is still subject to boycott by the global Palestinian-led BDS movement for Palestinian rights. Its new factory is actively complicit in Israel's policy of displacing the indigenous Bedouin Palestinian citizens of Israel and the Negev. SodaStream's mistreatment of and discrimination against Palestinian workers is not forgotten either. So why aren't the successes of integration at companies like SodaStream and Iskar not told?
So the House of Commons don't care about the environment. Look at all the paper she's used. What, 5 sheets of paper now?
Some of which had once lived in Gaza. They moved when the occupation ended in 2005, but they still have Palestinian friends there. It's that kind of relationship you don't hear about. Extremists don't want to portray any kind of normal life, any kind of success or quality of existence, whether they're Hamas or the BDS movement. Neither promote peaceful coexistence. The BDS movement boasts that in 18 years they've done 18 years worth of turning darkness into light, which is quite some sugarcoating, if you ask me. The BDS movement have an anti-normalisation charter. It forbids, and I quote, Any participation in any project, initiative, or activity, local or international, that brings together on the same platform Palestinians and Israelis who do not meet the following two conditions. One, the Israeli side publicly recognizes the UN-affirmed inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, which are set out in the 2005 BDS call. And, the most important part, the joint activity constitutes a form of resistance against the Israeli regime of occupation, such as colonialism and apartheid. This is evidence, if it was ever needed, the BDS movement do not want peace. The BDS rejects Jewish people's right to self-determination. They occasionally call for the eradication of Israel.
She's messing it all up because she's only got 8 minutes to read like 8 pages of whatever speech she wrote.
Campaigns often include allegations of Jewish power, dual loyalty, the Jewish Israeli.
Well, she's messing it up because she's trying to do it all in under 8 minutes.
Such a negative impact on the Jewish community here in the UK. The Jewish Leadership Council have made the case that public bodies in the UK are more likely to interact with people than the government, and that it's therefore important they are trusted by all communities.
Whoa, girl, slow down. No one can understand you.
But this is undermined when they seek to involve international matters and support BDS movements. The events of the last few weeks, I hope for many, will give people a better understanding of why Israel is so important to the Jewish community. Having worked in the community, visited Israel a number of times and worked with Holocaust survivors, I thought I understood. But for many in the Jewish
I don't know who these people are on the sideline, but there's microphones there, so they must be MPs from some sort of party, because when they're MPs all sit in the House of Commons in London, they have their own seat.
So when a movement seeks to single out the world's only Jewish state as a unique evil, it's clear to see why this
it's like you being in a classroom. When you go in your classroom, you have the same seat all the time.
And seeks to divide and maintain division rather than strive for peace. Supporters of BDS may claim victory if they were to have their way. However, they cannot claim with any credibility that they are supporters of a two-state solution. Boycotts harm Israel, they harm Palestinians, they harm any prospect of peace. This bill is not a barrier to peace. The BDS movement and opposing this bill is a barrier to peace. I applaud the government for its strong stance in taking that BDS and for bringing this bill forward before the House, and I'll be wholeheartedly supporting it.
Election of the Defence Committee Chair. 433 votes were cast, 3 of which were invalid. There was a single round of voting with 430 valid votes. The quota to be reached was therefore 216 votes. Robert Ports was elected chair with 249 votes. He will take up his post immediately, and I congratulate him on his election. The results of the counts under the alternative vote system will be made available as soon as possible in the vote office and published on the internet. Zora Sultana.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak to the amendment in my name as well as the Amendment 13 tabled by my honourable friend, the member for Ashton under Lyne, which both relate to how this bill will impact public bodies' rights to make ethical decisions on matters relating to international law and human rights. And so that is what I will begin with. Gaza, the United Nations has said, has become a hellhole. Israeli bombs have decimated whole neighbourhoods. In 6 days alone, 6,000 bombs were dropped on the besieged enclave. That's more bombs than NATO forces dropped in an entire year.
The guy sitting behind there is Jeremy Corbyn. It used to be the Labour Party. He hates Israel.
And I quote, was on damage, not accuracy. Nearly 6,000 Palestinians have been killed, including nearly 2,500 children.
2,500 children have been killed in Gaza now.
People dead.
Wow. When were they all killed?
The most densely populated areas on Earth, where 2.3 million people, half of whom are children.
It's over 1,000 kids killed in the last 24, 36 hours.
Even before the recent violence, Gaza had been besieged for more than a decade and a half, with access to land, air, and water. Back in 2010, even Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron called it a prison camp. But now Israel
How about
total siege.
Israel
Water, fuel,
treats Gaza like any other country, removes their blockade and secures their borders?
Israel's evacuation order demanding 1.1 million people flee their homes was described as impossible without devastating humanitarian consequences by the United Nations. The World Health Organization called it a death sentence for the sick and injured. Indiscriminate bombing, collective punishment, forcibly displacing people. These are clear violations of international law, not according to me, but the United Nations General Secretary.
It's not according to the United Nations General Secretary, it's according to the Geneva Convention that was signed in Warsaw in 1948.
Imagine the fear and anguish of families who have seen loved ones taken hostage.
In fact, it was probably before that.
Palestinian families facing constant Israeli bombardment. Yet on this question, the United Nations General Secretary again said yesterday, international law is...
It's not about the United Nations. It's not about international law. It's about the Geneva Convention that say prisoners of war have rights to a bed, a shower, food, water, medical treatment. Even prisoners of war have rights. They also have the right to escape as well, if you can.
Madam Deputy Speaker, that is utterly shameful, and it goes to the heart of the problem with this bill and the need for these amendments. Because Israel's brutal war on Gaza is not an isolated example. The Saudi-led war on Yemen, for example, which I've spoken about repeatedly in this House, has claimed the lives of more than 150,000 people and has included war crimes like the Saudi bombing of a school bus, which killed more than 40 children and a dozen adults. That war has also been waged with the British government's support, including considerable military equipment and assistance. But let's find some historical examples. Perhaps most notably, Madam Deputy Speaker, the government's support for the apartheid South African regime, which people should be absolutely ashamed of and embarrassed about, during which the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, called the ANC and Nelson Mandela terrorists, and young Conservatives proudly wore badges calling him to be hanged. Madam Deputy Speaker, in each of these cases, whether it's Israel's war on Gaza, the Saudi war on Yemen, or apartheid South Africa, violations of international law and gross injustices have been committed with the support and complicity of the British government. But if this bill is passed unamended, on these matters and more, public bodies like local councils and universities will not be able to make ethical procurement or investment decisions. Local democracy would be sidelined and they would be forced to ignore questions of human rights and international law. The case of South Africa shows most clearly why this is such a mistake. Because whilst the government, I'm going to continue, whilst the government supported the apartheid regime, local councils across the country rallied around the anti-apartheid movement, with 39 councils across the country having divested from companies operated in South Africa by 1985. If this bill had been put in place then, that action would have been illegal. That's why a huge coalition of more than 70 organisations have come together to oppose this bill. Organisations including trade unions such as ASLEF, the Fabricators Union, Unison, Unite, and campaign groups like Greenpeace and Liberty. The amendment in my name and Amendment 13 seek to address this grave mistake, protecting the right of public bodies to make ethical decisions and not leaving them at the whim of deeply unethical decisions of national governments like ours. I therefore urge members from across the House to support these amendments. Thank you.
Kick off first.
Madam Deputy Speaker.
You go, girl. I love that.
An elderly Jewish constituent came to see me in my surgery, concerned about her own safety following a rise in violence in Israel and Palestine and resulting anti-Semitism here in the UK. I said to her then that if the mob ever came for her, they would find me before they got to her standing in her driveway with my baseball bat in hand. And I've stood with the Jewish community across the UK, particularly in London over the last nearly 25 years of my political career. So when I am told that in seeking to improve this legislation or in expressing doubts about its impact,
that somehow I'm picking a side. And the implication is that I'm not standing with that community. I find it both insulting and offensive. Particularly, I have to say, coming from members of
If Hamas
who
tried to get a hold in the UK, he's just hit the nail on the head. You will find people at the end of their driveways with baseball bats ready to smack them. Even the Germans couldn't get hold of the mainland UK because we would have been there with baseball bats, pickaxes, garden forks, petrol bombs made out of fuel and milk bottles. Oh, it'd be hell.
For the bodies of their children. For us to bring forward legislation which members on this side have said in terms is picking a side seems to me remarkably insensitive, not least because our Prime Minister is frantically touring the world, trying his best to work with the Qataris and others to release those hostages, and they must be released as soon as possible. I cannot see,
as I said, release all hostages, put medical ships off the Mediterranean coast, so that's Lebanon, Israel, Gaza, and Egypt, plus Turkey. Evacuate all the sick from all the hospitals in Gaza and Israel, put them on the hospital ships, and then get rid of all the Hamas.
And taking my amendments in turn as they appear on the paper. First of all, Amendment 7. And this amendment goes, I think, to the heart of much of the objection that people have to this legislation, because in carving out Israel, the West Bank, and occupied Golan Heights in the legislation, the Secretary of State is, I'm afraid, playing into anti-Semitism, the anti-Semitism.
Israel's endgame is to take over Syria, which will include the Golan Heights, take over the West Bank and Gaza, which will be the Palestinian territories. Then they want to take over Lebanon, and then they want to take over Egypt. So basically, Israel's endgame is Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, West Bank, and Gaza. They want basically the whole of the Middle East outside of, from the Mediterranean right up to Turkey, I suppose. They basically want to take over the Ottoman Empire all the way up to Turkey. I'm not sure on a map now, but if we say Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, Golan Heights, West Bank, and Gaza, that's the thing. When Israel attacked Syria today, that proves to the world they're not interested in peace. They want the Middle East. They don't want Israel. They want Jerusalem. They want the West Bank. They want Gaza. They want Golan Heights. They want Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt. They want the whole lot. They took Gaza from Egypt. The Golan Heights is a demilitarized zone, which actually belongs to Syria, but it's protected by, the last I heard, Filipino United Nations Trust. So Golan Heights is basically right now a no man's land. It's not owned by anybody. And the United Nations is there to make sure Israel doesn't walk into it.
Those who've been specifically elected on a foreign policy platform, like 17 councillors who served at the City Council on behalf of the Justice for Kashmir Party, have a specific democratic reason for being there to express.
This is how the British government work, by the way.
Circumstances where councillors councillors.
These aren't the government talking now. These are members of parliament. You have the government that run the country, and then these guys vote on the laws, yes or no, basically. And we tell them what to do.
Well, the honourable gentleman speaks with experience, and he's put it extremely well. He is quite right to assume that councils are merely...
Assume? You never assume, mate, because it makes it ask you me.
Is completely erroneous. They're elected for all sorts of reasons. There are many councillors, and indeed others of devolved administrations, who campaign on some of these social, moral, ethical, and indeed foreign policy issues, who would say they have a mandate, and to not even be able to express opposition to the law while still complying to it, with it seems to me very un-British and extremely illiberal and unnecessarily draconian. We have lots of laws in this country which councillors of opposing political persuasions and the other elected officials can express opposition to. To have an exception in this basis seems to me frankly ridiculous. On Section 4, pension funds, and I should declare my interest as a member of the local government pension fund, I understand under this legislation it is the only fund.
For to post the next comment. No, I'm not. All I'm losing is the spammers. I'm definitely not losing hundreds of viewers. You're having a laugh.
Second reading, I outlined my objection to this, not least because we just appointed a free speech czar and we've legislated.
You don't like slow mode up? Go elsewhere then.
Here we are through this bill. But there is a technical issue which is about universities being classified as public bodies. As the Secretary of State will know, there's been quite a flurry at the Treasury because further education colleges have been classified as public bodies, which means all their debt comes onto the public balance sheet. This is another step towards universities with their even greater level of debt coming onto the balance sheet, about which the
if Raymond wants to speak to no one, then that's his business. I'm not going to be here. Well, guess what, Greg? I don't really care. Like you said, 3 of you in the room. That's how much you care. Yeah, I'm losing hundreds of viewers. Really? Now, point me in the direction of one chat room that's got hundreds of viewers in it. You people are absolutely hilarious. What's the matter? You're all upset because you can't spam the board. Complain about it being 1 minute. I'll make it 10 minutes next time. Or maybe I'll make it once every 60 minutes.
Weeks, possibly, if not longer, particularly the houses of recess, for them to respond. And my amendment, number 6, proposes that if the government declares...
Or I'll just do what the other live streams do. Turn chat off altogether.
By issuing their own sanctions, if you like, or just...
Cry because you can't spam the board, because that's exactly why we put the restrictions on, to stop you people from spamming the board.
Because while this debate, Madam Deputy Speaker, has been, I'm afraid, positioned as a pro-Israel and pro-Palestine debate, I'm actually pro-Britain primarily. And so I want to get the legislation right for this country, right for the Jewish community, right for every community in this country, so that we can live with the consequences for years to come.
So you can't be bothered to wait 1 minute for the next thing. Right? Why would you have to wait a minute to type your next comment when you could have typed it up to 200 characters? Wow, excuse me.
frankly be horrified by this blatant attack on basic democratic rights of elected public bodies to act on behalf of the residents who elected them. This bill specifically protects the state of Israel, Israeli companies and their human rights abuses, and local authority sanctions, no matter what human rights abuses it might commit.
Whoa. What's up with these people? Can't they speak or read English?
Councils are not free and indeed have a duty to act to prevent or discourage breaches of international humanitarian law. It is clear Israeli settlements are illegal under international law, and no local authority or government should be offering support to such activity. The government's anti-BDS bill contradicts the guiding principles on business and human rights published by the United Nations. The anti-BDS bill penalises public bodies complying with the UK's responsibilities as a permanent member of the UN Security Council and takes away the democratic rights of public bodies to make ethical financial decisions. The bill uniquely shields human rights abuses in Israel, allowing Israel to act with impunity. Indeed, this bill in exempting specific countries.
Oh my God! See that guy here? That's my MP.
Now, just so, when we do not know what future actions such countries may take. This is a show of complete contempt for the people of Palestine and the daily inhumanity, abuse, and
I can't think of his name now,
they face.
but that's my MP.
This bill is a textbook case of divide and rule. Textbook case of divide and rule politics. It is profoundly disappointing that the government is pursuing ahead with the anti-boycott bill at this moment when tensions are deeply high, extremely high in our community.
Whoa!
In the past few weeks, over 7 almost 7 have been killed, almost half of them children. 1,400 Israelis killed, with the civilians of Gaza being massacred by Israeli airstrikes, and war crimes are happening in real time. It's an immediate ceasefire that is required, and the Prime Minister, the government, the leader of the opposition, and all political leaders in this House should be calling for an immediate ceasefire. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions are an effective means of court resistance. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill is no less toxic than when it was at the previous stage.
Can't these people read?
It will close up a vital democratic avenue for the closest representatives of ordinary people.
Martin Vickers, that's his name.
Accountability and change.
Martin Vickers, my MP.
This government cares about the lives of civilians and the plight of persecuted and exploited communities around the world. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do welcome this bill. It fulfills a manifesto commitment and it restates and protects the government's foreign and trade policy prerogatives by preventing local authorities and other public bodies from pursuing politically motivated foreign policy objectives of their own. And some have said this bill would limit free speech, but I don't think that is correct, because individual councillors and officials of public bodies can still say whatever they like as private citizens within the law, as long as that speech, of course, is lawful. But local councils have no democratic mandate to use their control of taxpayers' funds and assets to create their own foreign policy, or to express divisive opinions that undermine social cohesion in the communities for which they're responsible. We've heard devolution spoken about in the Chamber, and I'm a supporter of devolution. But the whole point of devolution is that certain powers are devolved and certain powers are not. And when my constituents go to the ballot box at local elections, they vote for the candidate who they think will be the best person to ensure regular bin collections.
And we don't even know the people, so how can we vote for them?
They're not voting on foreign policy, or defence policy, or income tax rates, because these are nationally reserved issues for the Westminster government. It's therefore unjustifiable for local authorities to pretend that they do have a democratic mandate to use ratepayers' money to signal their own foreign policy positions. So this bill doesn't restrict free speech, rather it restricts public bodies from undermining policies decided nationally
They won't
by
help.
national governments elected in national ballots. None of the amendments we're debating today would enhance the bill, and in fact some are intended to make it unworkable. Amendment 4, for example, would make the pension scheme divestment provisions unworkable. Amendments 7 and 21 seek to remove an important clause of the bill which relates to Israel.
See, messing up because they only have 8 minutes to do whatever they're doing or whatever it is now.
All recorded recent examples of public bodies pursuing boycotts against foreign states or territories have been against Israel. BDS, which we've heard about extensively today in the debate, is unique in its targeting of the world's only Jewish state. The BDS movement is not a harmless, peaceful movement. It has alarming links to extremists, including the Hamas terrorist group, which has just committed probably the worst crimes that we've seen in my lifetime, the worst mass killing of Jews since the Holocaust. Public bodies...
When will people learn? These weren't Jews. They were members of the public from all over the world. When will these people wake up?
His opposition to Israel's right to exist as a state of the Jewish people.
Right, that guys.
Armed resistance. When public bodies seek to undermine British foreign policy and trade policy and choose to do that only for matters relating to Israel, it gives legitimacy to and encourages the sort of appalling anti-Semitic process and attacks that we have seen over the past few weeks. Take my home city of Sheffield as an example. In 2019, the council passed a motion regarding their position on Palestine. It had nothing to do with their responsibilities as a local authority, but everything to do with their attempt to signal their anti-Israel political views. On the 1st of November, in under a week's time, the Green Party councillors will put forward a motion entitled Stopping the Genocide in Gaza that makes no mention of Hamas and its terrorism. Since the horrific terrorist attack on Israel by Hamas, we've seen some shocking scenes on the streets of Sheffield. The Israeli flag torn down from the town hall, anti-Semitic chants on our streets, even a roadblock set up by supporters of Hamas, intimidating drivers and asking for money. And I find it unbelievable and shameful that after witnessing the despicable attacks, torture and rapes of Jewish civilians, these actions can take place in Sheffield, supposedly a city of sanctuary. It's very difficult for the Jewish community in Sheffield to feel safe when the local authority, the official elected body, appears to align itself with hardline anti-Israel movements. And that's why we need this bill, because yet again, Israel and the Jewish people are being singled out and subjected to discrimination across this country and across the world. This singling out of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, is just another form of the world's oldest prejudice. Of course the government of Israel can be criticised by British citizens, as can any government in the world. But it's unacceptable for local authorities and public bodies to abuse their position to make divisive political interventions for which they have no democratic mandate. That's why I support for this bill to go forward unamended.
Stephen Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to begin by saying I'm not sure it's helpful, as some have sought to do in this debate today, to link the proceedings with the current crisis in Israel and Gaza. I think we should be careful about that. And I want to thank my right honourable friend for Ashton Underline for the tone she adopted in her opening remarks and her for sensitivity and moderation in our approach to this issue. For me, the nature of the BDS campaign is to promote anti-normalisation. It's encouraging the notion that there shouldn't be contact, trade, exchange, negotiation, even dialogue with Israel. The founder of the BDS movement has repeatedly expressed his view that the Israeli state shouldn't exist. And for me, it's clear what the aims of the movement are. And consequently, I'm utterly opposed to the aims of BDS. And I believe there is detrimental to the interests of the people in this country as they are to the people of Israel and the Palestinians. And I often think when I hear people talking about the BDS movement, they completely misunderstand exactly what the nature of our relationships with Israel are in terms of trade, medicines, security, technological exchange, the way people in this country are kept healthier and safer as a result of those relations. So I say I'm utterly opposed to it. And not only does it target Israel and hurt the Palestinians, detrimental to the interests of the people in this country. Now, just in passing, as a Birmingham MP, I want to make a reference to the point raised by the Right Honourable Gentleman for Northampton North, who's unfortunately not in his place at the moment. I just want him to know that Veolia still have a contract with Birmingham City Council, despite his great efforts to suggest that Birmingham were responsible for Veolia pulling out of Israel. I think he rather overstates the case, Deputy Speaker. I do want to say to the Secretary of State and to the Minister, who was extremely courteous and reasonable to the committee, but I do want to say to them, after so many hours in committee and such a period for reflection, I'm really disappointed to see that we've had so little movement from the government at the court stage. And I hate to say this, but I actually find it's hard not to reach the conclusion that the aims and the arguments of BDS may not be the total priority here. And I hope I'm wrong about that, and I hope that people will be able to demonstrate to me that I'm wrong about that. I have to say I remain strongly of the view that the government would be well advised to drop clause 3.7 altogether. I think it will probably make things worse, and I found myself in total agreement with the Honourable Member for Hampshire on that. And I remain unconvinced by clause 4.1b, and I do support amendments 16 and 13. And I also want to support new clause 3, which seeks to provide protection for religious dietary requirements. I think it was mentioned earlier that one of the BDS movement proposals was to remove kosher food from supermarket shelves. Now, I can't believe anyone in their right mind would actually think that is a reasonable way to proceed, and so I welcome the new clause. In my view, Madam Deputy Speaker, we need a bill to address the iniquities of the BDS movement. We need a bill to unite people on all sides of this House who genuinely want consensus and broadly share the same aims. I regret the bill in its present form is not a piece of legislation that will achieve that outcome. And I urge ministers, there's still time to reconsider the approach. There's still time.
Hey, it's better up here.
Consensus.
Deputy Speaker,
Who's in?
it seems to fall to
Hey ho.
speak last in this debate from the back benches. And
Hey hey. Oh, I'm downstairs cooking at the moment.
Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the member for Birmingham City, with whom, if I'm not mistaken, we visited Gaza together some 11 years ago. And I think this evening it was mentioned by one colleague that the question tonight is, which side are you on? I don't think that is the question at all, Madam Speaker. If I'm asked that question, my answer is always the same. I'm on the side of the United Kingdom. And that, I believe, is what everyone in this House, with the possible exception of those who seek not to be in the United Kingdom, that's where we should all be. And that requires really me and all of us to define the national interest in the context of this and any proposed legislation. Now, we can define national interest in different ways. Deep family ties with Commonwealth members, our close cultural and economic ties with our neighbours in Europe, our shared values with fellow democracies,
our historical links with nations around the world. But we would place first, surely, our security and the potential vulnerability of this nation to terrorists and nations abroad who would damage us.
Yeah, he's hit the nail on the head. It's not about Israel. It's not about Gaza. It's not about Lebanon. It's not about Syria. It's about protecting United Kingdom interests, which it means home and abroad. Basically, back to my days in the armed forces, I said I would protect the free world. It's not. It's basically to protect United Kingdom interests, home and abroad.
It means that we, without reservation, condemn the appalling acts of Hamas in its invasion of several villages and kibbutzes of southern Israel, close to the border. Its murder of civilians and its taking of hostages from, I believe, 41 countries. It means that we strongly support Israel's right of defense, but it also means that we believe that the invasion of Gaza by air, let alone by ground, has inevitably already caused as well, if not more, civilian casualties in ways that have already almost certainly broken the rules of international engagement, including in terms of access to water, electricity, fuel, medicines, and so on. Now, I understand and I accept that all infrastructure in Gaza is compromised by Hamas. There will be buildings and basements of schools and hospitals and so on that Hamas is using. But that does not justify, for example, bombing buildings of refuge in the compound of St. Porphyrius. So our position in this nation for a genuine two-state solution that allows for both the state of Israel, a remarkable state with so much to admire, and a state of Palestine, with people who've suffered since the Nakba of 1948 over access to lands, in some cases seized illegally in the occupied territories, as United Nations law makes clear. This is the right position, however difficult to achieve, however abused by this Israeli government's continued deliberate building of illegal settlements in the occupied territories, and by Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran's refusal to allow Israel to exist at all. And this then is the relevance of a pro-UK policy to this particular bill, the EAPB, because into this delicate landscape of increasing polarization throughout the Middle East strides the economic activity of public bodies bill. Now, I do agree with the principle of reducing local government posturing on foreign policy. Some of us are old enough to remember the Labour Lambeth Borough Council's nuclear-free zone. But the principle of the AAPB can be reasonably in the national interest. And I agree with the member for Birmingham Selly and many others on both sides of the House that the BDS movement is clearly anti-Semitic. It's clearly aimed at Israel. There is no question about that. But at the same time,
pardon me,
when my friend, the member for Brigham Pool, advised that we should therefore stop
Brigham Pool, that's by me,
regardless, and support Israel and its government's statements on any issue regardless. I do not think that that is the case. Our support should not be at the price of explicitly giving the Israeli government a completely free hand in its policy towards the West Bank and the occupied territories, riding roughshod through UNSC motion drafted by the United Kingdom and Deputy Speaker. Because without them, the facts on the ground, as the government likes to call them, makes a two-state solution harder and harder. And therefore, the motivation behind the drafting of Amendment 7 today, which I am supporting so strongly, Israel at all, it is not to support the constituent of mine who said to me in a peace march, notice the irony of the words, a peace march, who said,
I'm for the United Kingdom and I'm for any country in the world to live free without being bullied.
But I am doing so because there are many others of my constituents and other Muslims in this country who do believe in a two-state solution.
Yeah, I do. I believe in Gaza being made into a country, given its own airport, its own ship ports, its own ports of entry, self-governing, like any other country in the world. Gaza is the only country in the world that doesn't have its own airport. And the only one who's stopping it is Israel. You know, before the 1947 war, or 1948, Gaza actually belonged to Egypt. And then Egypt and Israel went to war, and the end result was all the refugees could go to Gaza. So they made Gaza into an independent state, which is now recognized by the United Nations.
So he's not about being naive. He's recognizing the BDS movement is deeply unpleasant.
I've never even heard of this BDS movement, so I've got no idea who it is.
But we should not exclude from holding Israel to account, Madam Deputy Speaker, and therefore that is why I'm supporting Amendment 7 this evening.
Hold on.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the Right Honourable Member for Gloucester. And I rise to speak in particular in favour of the Member for North West Hampshire's Amendment 7. And it's with a heavy heart that I'm taking part in this debate today, frankly at all. I was half-minded not to. Because now is not the time. The impact of the awful violence in Israel and Palestine on communities across the world cannot be underestimated. But the answer is not to debate this bill right now. By all means, let's have space, time. There's only been statements. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. By all means, let's do that. But not this. It was unwise to even table this for this week. And on Monday, I urged the Prime Minister to change his mind. In his response, he spoke about the importance of not undermining community cohesion. Well, I would politely suggest that if you don't want to undermine community cohesion, the last thing you should do is bring forward this bill. And may I associate myself with the...
This is all about making it illegal in the United Kingdom to support Gaza and making it illegal in the United Kingdom to talk bad about Israel. If you talk bad about Israel, they will now send you to prison. If you fly the Palestinian flag, you will now go to prison. This is what they're talking about, and they're trying to stop it because it's against freedom of speech. You know, we don't want to do trade with Israel. They can't force us to. We disagree with the state of Israel killing innocent women and children. We're not allowed to say that now. So now they're trying to stop this going through, so it's not illegal for a person to have freedom of choice, freedom of speech. This is now about human rights and not about Israel and Gaza. That's why they brought in North Korea, Yemen, Myanmar, China. Hold on, I got about that. That was my food, I think.
And make no mistake, those leaders in the Arab world are watching what is happening here today. They will. And I don't think it shows us in the best light. And if the Prime Minister backs two states and wants to take any sort of lead, he needs to mean it. I'm sorry to say, but this bill coming forward in this week is not the mark of a statesman. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace because this conflict is affecting families across the UK as well as abroad. Maybe they're fearful of becoming the victim of a hate crime, and we have seen a dreadful rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia over the last 3 weeks. The Community Support Trust has recorded the highest ever number of anti-Semitic incidents across this 17-day period. Or maybe they are fearful for their family in the region, and I've spoken already many times about my fears for my extended family in Gaza. Or maybe they are fearful for their loved ones who are being held hostage by Hamas. If we are going to engage in this conflict, we should speak about how to get those hostages free. And earlier this week, I and my party leader met with some of those families, including the aunt of Ariel and Kfir, who are 4 years old and 9 months old. I was disgusted, Madam Deputy Speaker, to see a picture of 4-year-old Ariel defaced with horns, with Hitler imagery at a bus stop in Finchley this morning. An utterly grotesque act. I hope the perpetrators are caught and the full force of the law applied. This hateful anti-for debate. And on Palestinians, we should be speaking about the situation on the ground in Gaza and how we get aid in. Children in Gaza are writing on their hands so that if they are killed, they can be buried with their families. And I attended a vigil yesterday where we mourned those innocent children whose lives have been needlessly lost. It is not right that innocent Palestinians are being held account for Hamas's atrocities. Now, I've heard arguments, primarily from the government benches, purporting that Hamas are telling people not to move and find safety. But that, I'm sorry to say, is not what I'm hearing, certainly not from my own family. And may I say, I find it deeply offensive to suggest that Hamas are giving my family orders. The reasons why they are not moving is because they are frail, they can't, and even if they do, the south is being bombed too. The conversation has changed in Gaza. No longer do they ask, where do I go to be safe? The question now is, where do I go to die? So how to facilitate releasing those hostages? How to safeguard innocent civilian lives? It's a humanitarian ceasefire, a position backed by the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the United States Secretary of State Blinken, and finally, it seems, the government this morning. But Madam Deputy Speaker, what this House should be doing at this time is digging deep into our humanity and our compassion. It's a time for leadership, for soothing words, and for calm, to bring people together, all people, directly affected or not, and to demonstrate by what we do here how to let the light pierce in to the darkness and despair. So I support this amendment wholeheartedly, and I believe that this place can and should offer more than division. And Madam Deputy Speaker, let me make my final point very clearly. I do not want something like this to drive a wedge between any members of this House and our Jewish community. I stood with members
Thai chicken curry.
community in Oxford in the first week of the attack, and I grieved with them. We shed tears together.
Yes, shed tears together, my foot.
We all stand shoulder to shoulder with them now. And to those members who suggest pick a side, or even worse, suggest by voting not with the government today that I am against peace, how dare they? How dare they? I'll tell you what I am on the side of. I am on the side of basic humanity. I am on the side of those who want to bring consensus. I am on the side of the Israeli community, the Palestinian community, of the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian communities. This is a tragedy that affects the whole world, and I say to this government, do better.
David Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Yeah, like I said, this wasn't about an attack on Israel. This was an attack on the whole world.
Specifically to Amendments 7 and 3. Now, this bill was introduced pursuant to a Conservative manifesto commitment at the last general election, which was to ban public bodies from imposing their own direct or indirect boycotts, disinvestment, or sanctions campaigns against foreign countries. It's important to note, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the wording of that commitment is not country-specific. It's agnostic. But it's very clear from the debate thus far, most particularly the debate on second reading, but also today, that the measures contained in the bill are aimed primarily at the BDS campaign that has for some 2 decades targeted the state of Israel. This is quite proper.
Well, I must support BDS then, because first thing I said was
should be determined by the
blacklist.
Country, and not by
First thing I said was blacklist
public bodies.
Israel and the US.
It is broadly drawn, except in one respect, which paradoxically robs it of its breadth. And that is breadth, which is that it contains a specific measure to prevent any attempt at a later date to modify its provisions in respect of the conduct of the government of Israel in relation to the territory of Israel, the occupied Palestinian territories, and the occupied Golan Heights. And it's clear from the Secretary of State's remark at second reading that the principal mischief that the government intends to target is the undoubted evil of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic behavior, which have been among the most regrettable consequences, in fact deplorable consequences, of the BDS campaign. Clamping down on anti-Semitism is obviously important, indeed it's essential, and no one would dispute that it's a good thing. In fact, given the current events in and close to Gaza, and indeed on the streets of London, doing everything possible to prevent it is very much a priority. It's more than arguable, however, that in the case of public bodies, there is a legislative vehicle for doing that already, in the shape of the Equality Act 2010.
It's called a hate crime.
Section 149, which imposes a public sector equality duty on such bodies, requiring them to pay due regard to the need to foster good relations between persons of different religions, ethnicities, and nationalities. But the government has decided that the Equality Act is insufficient and has decided to go further and effectively to outlaw the activities of the BDS movement in relation to Israel only, using this bill as the vehicle. That is not a country-agnostic ambition of the sort that was envisaged in the manifesto commitment. This bill is a broad bill with one particularly anomalous element, and as such it throws up problems that the amendments seek to rectify. Amendment 7 addresses the problem that arises under Clause 3, Subclause 5 of which provides that the Secretary of State or the Minister for the Cabinet Office may make regulations specifying a country or territory to which the provisions of Clause 1 cease to apply, in permitting a public body to make a procurement or investment decision in such a way as to express political or moral disapproval of the conduct of a foreign state. However, Clause 3.7 goes on to provide that such regulations may not specify Israel, the occupied Palestinian territories, or the occupied Golan Heights. The effective Clause 3.7, therefore, is to make absolutely clear that the sole purpose of this bill is to give totally unique protection to Israel from BDS activity. I don't believe it should be necessary to bring that on the face of the bill. There may well be future circumstances in which it would be appropriate and desirable for public
I'm with this guy.
to express disapproval.
Instead of saying it's illegal to target one country, i.e. Israel, to be it's illegal to target any country to prevent trade.
However, accepting Israel, the occupied Palestinian territories and the Golan Heights from the ministerial power to make such regulations is a very strange approach. In the first place, it is not, as I've said, country neutral, which it should be. The absence of neutrality may indeed cause offence to people from other countries around the world, not least those moderate Islamic states who are doing their very best at the moment to try to defuse the tension that has arisen in the Middle East. Moreover, it creates an unacceptable equivalence between the status of the OPTs and the Golan Heights, both of which are arguably illegally occupied and are certainly, in the view of the government, in the case of the OPTs, illegally settled, and that of the sovereign territory of Israel itself. That's a matter that is likely, I'm afraid, to...
No, Golan Heights is a sovereign territory of Syria.
It may well put the United Kingdom in breach of its obligations.
When will these MPs actually get in the real world? Syria belongs, Golan Heights belongs to Syria. Gaza belongs to Egypt.
That exception is frankly perplexing. It means that if at some future time the government
West Bank?
to show disapproval
I'm not
of
sure.
the actions of the state of Israel, a cabinet minister would not be able to do so without launching standalone primary legislation. How can that possibly be a sensible approach? And why is it necessary? Are secretaries of states and cabinet office ministers so capricious, so inclined to engage in projects of their own, that they will pursue measures that are not approved of by the government? Aren't they trusted by the government to behave responsibly? And if not, why are they members of the government at all? The provision is illogical, unnecessary, and I think potentially damaging to the interests of the United Kingdom and its reputation. And I believe that this amendment is therefore entirely right. Amendment 3 seeks to remove clause 41B, which I believe constitutes a perplexing and indeed unacceptable constraint on free speech. If decision makers are prevented from making a particular investment or procurement decision because of the provisions of this bill, if it is indeed enacted, that should be the end of the matter. There is no good reason in a free country why they should be precluded from saying what they would have done were it not against the law to do so. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a Conservative government. Conservatives believe in and value free speech. Indeed, the government itself has recently legislated to protect freedom of speech under the law in the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, which makes this provision all the more anomalous. And I find myself in the extraordinary position of agreeing entirely with the remarks of the Right Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington in this regard. This is a deeply unconservative measure, and I believe that this amendment is right and the provision should go.
Secretary of State,
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank those who contributed to this debate for the thought and care that they have given to the legislation before us. I appreciate that we are debating these measures at a sensitive time. I appreciate that across this House there will be different emphases that people will place on aspects of this legislation and the broader issues with which it deals. Let me be clear. I have respect for everyone.
The only place this guy should be is the damn stage as a comedian.
Everyone in this House being united in their horror at terrorism, the desire for peace, and their belief in a two-state solution. We are seeking in this bill to give effect to a manifesto commitment, as my right honourable friend has just pointed out. And the bill was introduced earlier this year, and indeed completed its committee stage earlier this year. I'm therefore thankful for the stewardship of my honourable friend, the member for Kensington, with contributions from all sides of merit and thought and care. Of course, those debates took place before the horrific events of October the 7th, which so many colleagues in this debate have made reference to. It's important to remember, I don't think anyone in this House can forget, that on October the 7th we saw the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. That atrocity was perpetrated by terrorists from Hamas, whose aim is very clear and very simple: the elimination of the Jewish state, the elimination of Jewish lives, whatever the background beliefs or origin of those Jewish lives, they were to be exterminated. It is the case that there are still more than 200 hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. Across the House we grieve for them and their families, and I want to thank in particular the members for Walthamstow and Brantiste, with whom I've been in touch, who've been working very hard to ensure that
Walthamstow, E17. If you remember the pop group, E17, it's East London, Walthamstow. I put most of...
on Sunday to call for the return of those hostages. We also across this House sympathise with the innocent people of Gaza, and we sympathise with all those Palestinian people who have suffered, and we recognise that for many of the innocent people of Gaza, they are they are hostages too. They are hostages of Gaza, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the other terrorist organizations that operate within that territory. And it is vital at all times that we draw a distinction between those who suffer in Gaza and those who are perpetrating suffering in the name of terrorism. I'm very conscious we're debating these issues against that backdrop, but it is important that we look at the principles behind the bill. May I also thank our friend, the Ambassador of the State of Israel, who is here in the gallery to listen to our considerations. She and other ambassadors have been working with the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office in order to make sure that every hostage is released, is back home in their Jewish home with their families. It's important to recognise, in considering this legislation, what the bill doesn't do. A number of legitimate concerns were expressed, which actually don't reflect what is in the bill and what the bill is intended to achieve. The bill doesn't prevent any individual from articulating their support for the BDS campaign, or indeed any particular policy that the BDS campaign puts forward. It simply prevents public bodies being used and public money being used to advance that case. So any of us as individuals have a total right to freedom of speech, however offensive or difficult some of the words that some utter might be. Free speech is not affected by this bill. And the bill does not also prevent human rights considerations being taken into account.
Right, so it's not illegal for us to boycott Israel. It's not illegal for us to wave the Palestinian flag. It's illegal for local councils, local government to use public funds to boycott Israel. So if I say, right, don't buy from Israel, blacklist it, I can do that. But if I spend public money getting people not to buy from Israel, then I'll go to jail for it. Because at the end of the day, you can't invade a person's right to choose, basically. Oh, you're not allowed to not buy from Israel because it's anti-Semitic, or whatever they call it. I can't even say the word.
To the specific menace that is the BDS movement. It is, of course, possible for local government to consider adopting boycotts in a variety of ways, but the truth is that if we look at local government, and indeed, as my right honourable friend, the member for Pacific Pembrokeshire, has pointed out, at devolved administrations, the only country that has been singled out so far for boycott, divestment and sanctions campaigns has been Israel. Let's not hide from that fact. And the reason for that is that the BDS campaign is in itself anti-Semitic. It's not exercising disapproval of some particular foreign policy or domestic policy decision of the State of Israel. It is saying that Israel should not exist. It's instructive, though not easy, to look at the communications that this movement have issued on social media since October the 7th. Not one word of sympathy for the Israeli people in their suffering. Indeed, what they have said on social media, talking of those deaths, is their blood, the blood of the Jewish people, the Israeli people killed, their blood is on the hands of the Israeli government. This campaign has said the root cause of this violence, the deaths on October 7th, must be acknowledged. Israel as the occupier. The BDS movement has cited a variety of politicians as what they call partners in genocide. Rishi Sunak, Joe Biden, Olaf Scholz, and Ursula von der Leyen. And of course, the BDS continues to repeat the lie, the blood libel, that it was the Israeli Defense Force that was responsible for the tragic loss of life at the Al-Ami hospital in Gaza. That is what we are dealing with. And I'm very grateful to the member for making clear the horror that he holds and so many of us hold for the BDS movement. But of course, there is an argument that perhaps this bill is divided, not wanted in particular by many voices in the Jewish community, and there are some voices in the Jewish community who do have concerns, and we've listened to them. But it is also the case that the representative bodies that speak for Britain's Jewish community are united in supporting this bill. The Board of Deputies, which has representatives from every single Jewish constituency, Jewish organisation, every Jewish community, secular, religious, and also the Jewish Leadership Council, which has representatives from every political as well as faith tradition within the Jewish community. And also, we heard reference, this horrific thing to the increase that we've seen in anti-Semitic incidents over recent weeks, and indeed the member of Raymond Duggan made reference to the Community Security Trust. I've been in contact with the Community Security Trust this afternoon, and I should say that they sent me this message. BDS has a chilling impact on Jews. It is a modern reminder of anti-Jewish boycotts. It also serves to legitimize the shunning of Jews from decent society. And having been shunned, that's a halfway house to all manner of more abusive and physical outcomes. So I do think that while we respect the diversity of voices, when you have such unity from those who speak for the Jewish community, indeed the Jewish communities of the United Kingdom, when they are so clear that this legislation is in the interest of community cohesion, fighting anti-Semitism, and making the United Kingdom a safe house for everyone, when they are so clear, we should treat their words with respect. Now, of course, the point has been made that the mention specifically in the bill of Israel on the face of the bill could perhaps in some cases engender a greater degree of polarization and anti-Semitism. And I know that people who make that argument make it sincerely. But as the member for Brigham pointed out, sometimes you do just have to stand up for what is right. And if there are people who are provoked as a result of that, that is regrettable, but we should not shy away from telling the truth. We should not shy away from saying that what has been going on with Gaza's genocidal campaign against the Jewish people is something that we as a country need to stand against. And when the BDS campaign has in its leadership the leaders of Hamas, then we need to be clear about this evil and this menace. And it's not just my argument, it is also the argument of the Jewish community organizations that I cited earlier, including the Jewish Leadership Council. They said in their submission to the committee considering this bill that the inclusion of Clause 37 recognises the unique nature of the BDS campaign against Israel. They say, it is our belief that if this clause were excised as one amendment seeks to achieve,
if the feed stops, let me know.
Such a change would convert a bill
because I'm fixing another computer on.
From using our public bodies into a tool to facilitate it. I think it's debatable, of course, whether this is the right way forward. The Jewish Leadership Council are very clear that it is. But
why so many people in the house now? What happened? What did I miss when I was downstairs? Why did everybody suddenly come in? Are they voting? Are they about to vote?
For the state of Israel at this time.
What did I miss downstairs?
And therefore, I submit to every member of this House that we should listen to the Jewish community in the clarity with which they speak. I'd be delighted to.
I'm very grateful to him, and can I thank for the tone he's adopted so far. It's very important that we adopt the correct tone in this debate. Does he recognise the concerns that it's not just Israel that's in that specific clause, but why the government has included the occupied Palestinian territories and the Golan Heights, and that has also arised some comment and debate and criticism?
The honourable gentleman's point, and I do appreciate the concerns that he articulates, which I know a number of people share. But the way in which the bill is designed makes it clear there is a separation between Israel, refugees, and indeed the Golan Heights. And as the Jewish Leadership Council pointed out in their evidence to the subcommittee, on which I note he said the distinction, they say this clause recognises this distinction. It absolutely does, and it closes a loophole to ensure that public bodies cannot remain tools of the BDS movement against Israel. It is also the case that this clause, by making that distinction, and the bill overall reserves to the UK government the role of maintaining, as we do, our absolute commitment to a two-state solution. So the bill, as framed, is absolutely not in breach of international law. It enables the UK government to speak with one voice on behalf of the entire United Kingdom in our determination to secure a two-state solution, however difficult that prospect, however distant that prospect may be at the moment. I'm very happy to give way to my honourable friend and honourable friend.
Very good. I'm just interested in how, under clause 3, where it specifically says that the exceptions to any prohibition are A, Israel, B, the occupied Palestinian territories, and C, the occupied Golan Heights. What is the distinction there between Israel and those two that means that actually we can still hold the government of the day accountable for illegal settler occupations in those two occupied areas?
The fact that they are listed separately and individually affirms the absolute and principal purpose of treating them individually and separately. I'm sorry, if people on the front bench think it's appropriate to smile, laugh, and joke about this issue, then I regret that. If people disagree on a principal fashion, I do respect that. But the key thing here is that we know that there are people who've attempted to use language relating to what happens in the occupied territories. Indeed, my wife, the fellow member for Northampton North, former Attorney General, cited a number of examples of that. Specifically,
you're supposed to be talking to the speaker, mate, not the MPs.
Secretary, there's another point here as well. If we accept, as everybody who's spoken today has apparently accepted, that the BDS campaign is a pernicious anti-Semitic campaign, it is pernicious and anti-Semitic whether it's against the state of Israel or whether it's against products coming from the occupied Palestinian territories. So the campaign, the BDS campaign, should be outlawed wherever it takes place. It's very simple.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and indeed, again, the member for Northampton North, former Attorney General, made it clear that in France and in Germany, that the BDS campaign is outlawed in the way that we seek to do here. No one's nice for a moment that France and Germany under Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz are valued partners for peace, upholders of international law. Yes, of course.
I'm grateful to my brother friend for giving way. On this point of international agreements, my honourable friend agree with me that
if they took
the United Kingdom is party to a series of
Jordan
organisation framework agreements, such as the General Agreement, the UK has a duty not to discriminate in its trade practices and to permit public bodies to engage in anti-Semitic BDS activities would actually
so basically
our very international agreements.
Israel wants everything from Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Egypt. So they want everything from Libya up to Turkey, down to Saudi Arabia. So they want Jordan, which will be from Jordan to Saudi Arabia, from Israel to Saudi Arabia, from Israel to Kuwait, from Israel to Iraq. So they want Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel, then Egypt. So basically, they want everything down to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, excluding Iraq and Iran. So basically, they want the Palestinian territories, or what they used to call Philistines. So Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Egypt all used to be basically Ottoman Empire. Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia were independent. Bahrain we formed in 1948 after the war. So basically, everything from Turkey down to the Saudi Arabia border to Kuwait to Iraq would become Israel, which means everything from Libya to Sudan. So you're talking Egypt. So you're talking about the Sinai, Egypt one, but Israel one. So Israel wants to be like as big as America.
They
That'll never happen.
they respect the
Because
strong
we won't allow it. The world won't allow it.
But they have also been clear that they wish this
Israel will not be allowed to become any bigger than they are now.
I honour them in their
They're not going to get Gaza out of this. They're not going to get West Bank out of this. And they're not going to get Jerusalem out of this.
I call Christie to indicate whether or not he wants to move new clause 1 to a division.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I will not be moving new clause 1 and be pursuing a division on Amendment 28. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the honourable member have the leave of the House to withdraw new clause by leave withdraw? Amendment 14 has been selected for separate decision. I call Angela Rayner to move Amendment 14 formally.
Angela Rayner.
That the amendment been made.
Okay.
As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
No.
No. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Now there's the division. Okay.
Question is that Amendment 14 be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary no. Tellers for the ayes, Gerald Jones and Antoniaza. Tellers for the noes, Scott Mann and Joy Morrissey.
Please tell me he didn't just vape in the house. In the chamber. Please tell me he didn't just... Please tell me he didn't just take a puff of a vape in the chamber. He took a thing, blew it out, and then put it in his pocket. Is that Patel? Looks like Patel in the grey suit. Flipping heck, where did all these people come from? They must all be watching in their offices, and then they come out for the vote, and then to get the result, they sit in the chamber rather than going back to their offices. I guess they're all watching it on monitors in their offices. Division! Open the doors. Oh no, they've got to lock the doors first. Lock the doors. That's what these guys are. These guys, there and there, they're the ushers. They control the house. Lock the doors. You don't normally see them guys, though. Oh, they don't actually lock the doors. They just stand in front of the doors so they can't be opened. Shut up. Oh, no, it's not shut up. It's order, order. So where's the Prime Minister? How did he vote? Order, order. Why is the Speaker not in? Why is the Deputy Speaker there? Why is the Deputy Speaker taking up the Speaker? Ow, that was my head. Just headbutted the wall. The idiot used to be the thing.
To the right, 200, the nose to the left, 273.
The nose have it.
The eyes to the right, 200. The nose to the left, 273. So the nose have it unlocked.
No amendment. I don't know what that means.
Order Amendment 13 has been selected for separate decision. I call Angela Rayner to move Amendment 13 formally. The question is that the amendment be made. Of that opinion, say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. No.
Division. It's stupid, really, because whoever sounds the loudest gets it. When they shout yay or nay, you know, it's not fair because you've got no idea how many people are saying yes, and then you've got no idea how many people are actually saying no.
The question is that the amendment be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. Tell it for the ayes. Tonya and Tony Arzi.
If they go out of one door, I thought they actually voted, but they don't. They just, it depends which door they go out of. and then all the ones who stay seated down and don't leave the chamber have abstained. So they don't care either way. In other words, they're not bothered. Oh, guys, it's no good phoning me on your fake numbers trying to make out you're in America, because first of all, I know you're in Africa, and you're nothing more than scammers and hackers. You might be idiots in Africa, and if it comes back not in service, we know you're using a fake number. You can't talk to the opposition. Lock the doors. Oh, they do lock the doors. Okay, they lock the door and then say, I've never seen them lock the door before. Because you don't usually see them lock the door. But they do. You just lock the door. Now they stand in front of it.
The eyes to the right, 197. The nose to the left, 276.
The eyes to the right, 197. The nose to the left.
Nose have it.
So the nose have it unlocked. Amendment 7 has been selected for separate decision. I call Kit Malthouse to move Amendment 7 formally. The question is that the amendment be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. Clear the lobby.
She's making them vote.
Been made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Tellers for the ayes, Sir Desmond Swain and Tonya Antoniazzi. Tellers for the noes, Scottman and Joy Morrissey.
MPs have divided to vote on the Amendment 7 to the economic. If they go this way on the screen, it's no. If that way, it's yes. If they come forward, it's I don't give a damn. So I abstain. No vote. 674 MPs. So there's actually very few have voted. Gov is abstaining. That's funny. I don't know. All these people on those. That's funny. And all these people coming for they're going to get a coffee or something. I don't know what they're going to. I got no idea what all these seats mean. You'll have to say. The only seats I know is that seat there, which is for the government. This seat here is for the opposition. But these, I've got no idea what they're for. I wonder if she realizes the camera's on her. Look at the way she's sitting, like a little tart, legs wide open, so that the camera can see right up her skirt. There is actually a public gallery, and if you look there and there, they're televisions. Day's activities. I don't know if it's behind the screen now, because one day there was a protest that got in the public gallery and threw purple paint all over the Prime Minister. Hilarious. It was hilarious. Oh, pardon me. Why is she touching up the thing? If her skirt gets any higher, will see everything. She needs reprimanding for that. Oh my God, could she flirt? Now she's stroking her hair. She's got her legs wide open. Ah, talk about flirting. Flipping heck. This is hilarious. She knows the camera's right on her. Yeah, after they accidentally switched the mic on via, that would be hilarious. That's someone sending her a text saying, behave, the camera's right on you.
The nose to the left, 269.
Oh, the eyes have it. The eyes have it.
The eyes to the right, 207. The nose to the left, 269. So the nose have it.
It's not what he said. He said 307.
Amendment 28 has been selected for separate decision. I call Chris Stevens to move Amendment 28 formally.
Move formally.
The question is that the amendment be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Question is that the amendment be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Tell us for the ayes, Gavin Newlands and Peter Grant. Tell us for the noes, and Scott Mann.
What are kids doing in there? What the hell are the kids? Why is the kids in there? That must be kids screaming from the public gallery. Didn't know they allowed kids in the public gallery. You can't have kids screaming while there's government business going on. Unbelievable to think these are the people that run our country. These are the people that make the laws. Oh, and by the way, this really is live. And it'll probably be going on till 10 o'clock tonight. Apparently, government closes down for 10 days tomorrow. I don't know, some sort of. Lock the doors. Once they lock the doors, nobody can get in or out. I don't think I've met any MPs. Not serving now, anyway.
Order.
The ayes to the right, 197. The noes to the left, 275.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 197. The noes to the left, 275. So the noes have it, unlocked. Consideration completed. third reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. We now come to motion number 10 on Town and Country Planning England. Minister to move? The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, before we come to the next item of business, I have a short announcement to make. Earlier today, in response to a point of order about a BBC story regarding the item that we are about to deal with, reference was made to the speaker receiving legal advice. In fact, the reference should have been to procedural advice rather than legal advice. Motion number 11 on the independent expert panel. Leader of the House to move. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now...
This is a petition of the residents of the United Kingdom who are concerned that post offices will no longer provide customers with access to DVLA services. The petitioners say that post offices are vital in accessing DVLA services and provide a service to 6 million people. Senior citizens rely on post offices to renew their licences, which have to be renewed every 3 years after the age of 70. And citizens who are unable to...
Driving licences have...
...closure if customers are not able to renew licences or their vehicle tax. The petitioners therefore request the House of Commons to urge the government to recognise the importance of DVLA services remaining accessible from post offices and to renew the contract with Post Office Limited so person online renewal.
Petition, DVLA applications in post offices.
These guys here are lawyers.
Petition, Mr. Tobias.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to present this petition objecting to the proposed development at 21 High Trees Avenue in my constituency of Bournemouth.
They have to have a fleet of lawyers to make sure that the laws that they pass are legal, which means not a breach of human rights or any other bull.
The pressure on street parking and the increased risk of local flooding. I am pleased this application has already been dismissed both by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council and the Planning Inspectorate, but it is still subject to appeal. So the petition is there.
Petition, development proposals at 21 High Trees Avenue.
I have informed the House that I understand that the Lords do not insist on their Amendment 102B to the Procurement Bill laws. I also want to inform the House that I understand that the Lords do not insist on their Amendment 20B.
Oh my God, she's got a panic button at the side of the chair. Why is that?
Amendment 45, their Amendment 45, with regard to the levelling up.
These two things here are panic buttons.
No further proceedings on these bills will be necessary.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Damien Green.
How the hell can the House adjourn? It's not even 7 o'clock yet.
For the chance to bring to the House an issue which is not just of huge importance to my constituents in Ashford, but many people across the whole county of Kent and indeed beyond. That's the withdrawal of the international services which used to stop at Ashford and Ebbsfleet, but which was stopped when the pandemic international travel and have not subsequently been restored by Eurostar. I know
The German debates are short debates held at the end of business on each sitting day. The German debates are often used to bring constituency issues to the attention of government ministers.
Taking advantage of
In
the
from
European
Kent.
mainland to drive economic development and particularly inward investment. It also, of course, provided a large new leisure market with people from across Kent having easy access to Disneyland Paris.
The member for Ashford agreed that the international trains running from Ashford actually enhance connectivity, boost tourism, stimulate economic growth, promote cultural exchange, and have an environmental benefits for the coastal towns across Kent and East Sussex, including beautiful Hastings and Rye.
Ben is completely right, and as you will have heard, I made the point that this is of interest to people not just across Kent but beyond, and certainly she is a great champion for Hastings, and I agree with her that the effects of high-speed rail, in this case international rail, can spread prosperity and the opportunities that travel can bring far and wide from the station. Of course.
The case is, thank you, this week. The case is very well by my colleague about the opportunity for people. It's quicker for them to access Ashford International for those journeys.
Absolutely. I'm glad my honourable friend has made that point because, of course,
the international train they're talking about actually goes from St Pancras, Belgium, and Paris, as you said, Disneyland.
It's easy to drive.
Give me.
Get there by train. It's well connected. Makes it much easier to intersect with the international services. I'm glad to have his constituents added to mine and those of other colleagues around Kent as people wishing for Eurostar to restore this service.
But then I got a car, so I drove. I drove from my house down to Dover, got the ferry, and then drove France, Belgium, Holland. No, France, Holland, Belgium, then to Germany.
And with the sympathetic support of ministers in the government at that time,
Whole journey took me 14 hours.
That a business-based service allowing a sensibly timed journey from Ashford to Brussels in the morning and back in the evening. And this proved so successful that in 2015 a weekend Brussels service was added, as well as a new service to the south of France. Now, I obviously accept the fact that Eurostar is a private company and makes its own commercial decisions. But the UK government has a legitimate and important role in influencing those decisions, not least in the specific case of Ashford Station. In 2016, Eurostar introduced new rolling stock. That rolling stock demanded a whole new signalling system at Ashford Station to allow the new trains to stop there. And that was funded at a cost of £8.5 million through the local growth fund. In other words, this was the UK taxpayer spending specifically exactly zero. By a terrible irony of timing, the work was completed at exactly the same time as the pandemic struck in the early months of 2020 and international services were suspended. So no train has ever taken advantage of this spending. Now, I appreciate that £8.5 million does not seem much in the context of the quantum of money that may not have been entirely prudently spent in recent years on the railways. But the point is that this is not a wasteful investment. If utilised, would provide services that passengers want and make better use of the existing railway infrastructure. Specifically for the Minister then is the point that having spent this taxpayers' money, it is the government's responsibility to see that it was well spent, and therefore I hope and assume he'll be backing my call for weekend services to be resumed. Eurostar's current position has evolved, not in a helpful direction. In September 2020, they said no Kent services would stop before 2022. In 21, they said no services until 23. In 22, they said no services until 25. I and my honourable friend from Dartford have met them, and I met them on a number of occasions. Every one of those meetings, I would describe them as perfectly polite, but completely obdurate.
They are, of course, a commercial company whose contract is not determined by the same kind of franchise or concession model that national services have. Its majority ownership is the French nationalised rail company SNCF, with a small stake for the Belgian state rail company and the other 40% owned by private sector companies. Eurostar has now merged with the Thales Group. And it's undoubtedly true that the pandemic hit them a very severe financial blow. And to survive that blow, they took on large amounts of commercial debt, which they have to repay. They say that they still have the long-term ambition to grow their services, but that for a variety of reasons, they can't do so at the moment. But today, I think there are two reasons that make this discussion identified by Eurostar is coming to an end. The first reason is revealed in their own press release last June about their latest financial results. They say themselves, "We have turned the page on the COVID crisis and are now moving towards a new chapter of building the new Eurostar Group." Their earnings, EBITDA in the jargon, were a record 332 million euros. And clearly, they are now generating cash because they repaid 127 million euros of the debt they incurred during the pandemic. They are now, evidently, in a position where they could expand if they wanted to. But the second reason why I think it is timely to be having this discussion in public is the imminent arrival of a competitor to Eurostar in providing international services to the UK. The Everlink Consortium says that it has a £1 billion project to buy an initial 12 trains from Alstom and intends to start services in 2025. At the moment, they, like Eurostar, are only planning capital city services, but the advent of competition means that both companies will have to seek advantages, and the free offer of stations that are already built and raring to go is potentially a great advantage to either of them if they have the gumption to take it, start there. But we've already heard in the course of this debate that is not enough.